Good
Big,
morning, good
big,
morning, good
big,
morning.
big smiles on everybody's faces today because it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Who doesn't love Wednesday, right?
Well, it means we're closer to Friday than we were yesterday.
It's true.
You know, I was going to start the show out
Uh huh.
with us not saying anything
Uh huh.
and and just have this big long pause. But this is radio, so that's a really bad idea.
It is.
Dead air is not good for radio. But what we're going to talk about today is silence. And that is going to make a big dramatic point for everybody out there.
The sound of silence. Does silence have a sound?
Well, if a tree falls in the forest,
I think it still makes a
does it
sound.
make a noise?
I think it does.
Well, then silence makes a sound too.
What does it sound like?
It sounds like this. You have to be really good listener to hear it.
Okay.
The thing about silence though is that it gets a bad rap and it gets a good rap.
Right.
And
It's a good and a bad of things.
silence, like anything else, is a tool. It can be used for good and it can be used for evil. And in a marriage, there's a time and a place for it, and you have to know when is the right time for it and when is not the right time for it.
True.
You know, there are times when really you're just better off not saying anything.
Sometimes silence is golden, they say.
That's what they say. You know, I don't know if your mom ever said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
She did. She said that quite often. And sometimes we find ourselves in a place where um, it's just not good to say what you think.
Well,
And in this day and age, woohoo! Can you get yourself in trouble?
yes, you can. And the fact of the matter is, it's so funny because if you listen to what I just asked you,
Uh huh.
your mom told you that, and I bet most people's moms told them that. Like so many other pieces of really good advice that were given as children,
Uh huh.
we forget it as adults. And something that made sense when you were 7 all
Right.
of a sudden doesn't make any sense when you're 37, and you just lay into your spouse for the dumbest reasons. How many times have we had couples come in and they say, we really struggle with our communication.
Almost
We
all the time.
we 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 fight all the time,
Yeah. Almost all the time.
and it's usually over dumb stuff.
Indeed.
Okay, you fight all the time over dumb stuff,
And
which you know.
it's on those times when you want to say, well, just stop doing it.
Well, what would have happened if you'd have just shut up? That fight over the dumb thing
Mm-hmm.
probably never happens.
True.
And here's the thing that I think is particularly dangerous about this topic is normally the fights over dumb stuff
Mm-hmm.
happens when you open your mouth and you should have kept it shut. But then the fight over the big stuff happens when you shut your mouth and you shouldn't open it.
You should open it.
Should have opened it. Think about all the time that resentment builds up until it explodes all over a couple. Or if there's an unmet need that goes on for months and you never say anything about it, and all of a sudden you feel like your relationship is broken because the other person doesn't care about you, or else they would have given you the conversation that you needed or given you a better gift for your birthday. You know, sometimes you get a really crappy gift for your birthday or for Mother's Day, and that can that can be hurtful.
Especially if gifts is your love language.
I don't know anyone who's got gifts as a love language.
Yes,
Okay.
you do. That's not true.
I know some women who have gifts as a love language.
Right.
At least two, maybe more.
At least two. The two of the most important women in your life.
Yes.
So, good morning, Beverly. Good morning, DLC. Hey, if you are watching live with us on Facebook, chime in the comments and just let us know you're here.
And share us with your friends.
And share it with your
Especially
friends.
people who need help.
Right. You know, silence is, there are times, the Bible says, you know, even a fool is thought to be wise if he keeps his mouth shut. That's in Proverbs, in case you're wondering. And sometimes it's a really good thing to just listen more. The Bible, you know, one of my mom's favorite quotes about talking and listening was, you know, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them accordingly. And her thing was, you know, you should listen at least twice as much as you speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do that, all of a sudden, you know, then comes into play the scripture in Proverbs. That, you know, you look wiser if you say less. Sometimes you just say things and you just like, you know, and you just have that kind of, no, come back words, right?
Everything goes into super slow-mo.
And the other thing, another scripture that I love in the Bible, and it says that the power of life and death is in the tongue. So it's not necessarily about not ever speaking. It's about really making sure when we do speak, we speak the right things.
Yes, it is. And I think, you know, to go back to what I mentioned earlier, you know, couples, when they get into a fight, especially over something that is really not that important.
Right.
You know, oftentimes it's because the words should never have left their mouth. Other times it's because the wrong words left their mouth. You know, and the tricky thing about this is that silence is when it's needed, it's really effective.
And it's super powerful.
But when there needs, how many fights could be avoided if somebody went from being silent to saying, "I'm sorry"? I mean, think about this. You've done something wrong. You know you've done something wrong. The other person has let you know you've done something wrong. And all of a sudden, pride wells up in you and you're like, well, they're just being stupid about this and I'm not. I didn't even, what I did isn't even that big a deal. And well, if they're just going to get, they're just a big baby and, you know, if they can't take a little teasing, then too bad for them. And I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to apologize to them. And, you know, before you know it, their momentary hurt has become an offense. And by the time you say something, it's probably going to be too late when had you just said 2 little words
True.
right early on in the process, you'd have avoided a whole big conflict.
So I'm sorry is one of the things that we should say more often, right?
Yep.
I was wrong. Another set of words that needs to be used probably way more often than it's being used.
You know, there's a short sentence that I think would do a world of good if it was said more often.
What's that?
Steve, you're so good looking.
Steve, you're so good looking.
Why, thank you, hon. That's so sweet of you. It just starts my day off on the right foot.
And I'm married to the cute guy, you guys. So.
See how easy that was?
Yeah.
Everybody who runs across me today should be able to utter the simple sentence, Steve, you're so good looking.
They should be.
And just let it roll right off your tongue. It's not that hard.
No, it's not. And it would make you feel so happy. Right? It would make you dance for joy.
I could do a little hand dance like my wife did earlier.
But
Get some jazz hands
I mean, think
going.
about it. Think about how. Let's talk for just a few minutes here about how we can uh, listen better, and then let's talk about how we can speak better. And here's the thing: there's listening to reply, and there's listening to respond. Right?
And here's the thing. If you listen well, your response is going to be better informed.
Right.
Your response is going to be more conducive to a solution rather than prolonging the conflict. And I think that there you brought up a very important distinction. Listening to reply and listening to respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I am taking the time when you're speaking to build the counter argument in my head, we're not going to get very far.
No, and how often does that happen?
We're going to go round and round and always wind up in the same place. But if I am listening to gain information so I can make a better educated response and move us closer to a solution, we're gonna see hopefully fast progress and an end to the conflict. But I think a lot of times we go into a disagreement with the idea that I'm right, I need to convince you that you're right.
No, I'm wrong.
I need to convince you that
you're
I'm
right. Yeah.
Because I'm right and I'm good looking.
You are, both of those things.
And you're wrong, but also good looking.
Thanks. Sort of.
Right? Isn't that how it works?
That's sort of how it works.
I'm right, you're wrong.
Uh-huh.
And if you could just come around to my way of thinking, everything would be better.
Well, my life would be better if you agreed with everything I said. My life would be better if you did everything I wanted you to.
I do a staggering percentage of what you want me to do.
Okay, can we just pause for a moment? And I have to tell you, not only am I married to the cute guy, yay.
You have a husband somewhere that I don't know about? There's double life?
No. But also, I am married to one of the most giving and biggest servants on the planet. And this is an undisputed fact. Steve loves me way better than I love him.
I don't know if I love you better. I just love you differently. I love you in a different way than you.
Y'all, come on. There's no mistake. And he loves me way better than I love him. And that's not even up for debate. But part of the reason that I feel really loved for him, we're pretty quiet today. That's unusual. We're usually really loud. So thanks for telling us, Jason. Let us know if we get better. We'll talk louder. How about that? Anyway, one of the things that I noticed, maybe you should turn up your volume, just teasing Jason, is that one of the reasons that I feel like Steve loves me so well is because he's always willing to listen to what I say. And he always responds with things that let me know he's listening, let me know that he's heard. Now, it doesn't mean he always understands exactly what I'm trying to communicate, but he always communicates in such a way that helps me know that he's been listening and he's doing his very best to understand what I'm saying. And that is such a powerful part of silence. And for girls, can I just speak to the wives out here for a minute? Here's the thing about us. We have this tendency, because we're women, to talk at the same time with everybody else in the room. And if 6 girls go to lunch, all 6 of them will talk at all the same time. We'll all carry on we'll all carry on conversations. We might have 5 different conversations going on around the table, but everybody is fully engaged in all of them. And we had to plug us in. And we had to, and we have to just be aware of that's not the way men work, right? And even girls, sometimes when we do that with other women and other girls, and while the other girls aren't offended by it in any way, here's the truth. We don't always hear accurately what the other person's trying to communicate. And so there is this powerful piece of silence that says, I'm going to listen fully and completely until you're done with what you have to say. And listen, if you have someone who talks, Steve talks slower than me, way slower than me, and so my brain works way faster, and it's sometimes really hard. But I have to really make sure that I stay quiet long enough to allow him to finish what he's saying, so that I get the full picture of what he's trying to say.
Did you see how good I was at being silent there? I
You
was just
were.
giving an example for you out in the audience. Sometimes you need to just shut up and let the other person finish. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a couple quick commercials. We will be back talking about the sounds of silence, when it's good to be quiet and when it's good to open your mouth. Please stick with us. We will be back shortly here on Building Bridges with Steve and Melisa.
The Children's Center Rehabilitation Hospital in Bethany is a faith-based nonprofit organization specializing in the care of children and teenagers with complex special needs. Our medical team at the Children's Center focuses on transitioning children from hospital to home in a loving, caring environment. You can help make miracles happen for these incredible children at the Children's Center by donating today at miracleshappenhere.org.
Ah, do you hear that? That means the start of a good day in my household. If I don't have that first cup to begin my morning, then I'm guaranteed my day is going to be a struggle. And nobody makes better coffee than Grounds for Compassion coffee. It's coffee with conviction. So head on over to their website, g4c.coffee. That's G, the number 4c.coffee, or give them a call at 405-603-1902 to get your own cup of Get Up and Go.
And we're back here on Building Bridges with Steve and Melisa on Crossover Radio, radio with a purpose. Today we're talking about silence and its role in a relationship, and when it's appropriate and when it's not. And one of the things I'd like to talk about now is when something happens and it hurts you, or you feel like something is chronically unfair in the relationship, and you happen to be a conflict avoider, so you say nothing. And you think, oh, well, I'm going to say nothing. I don't want to start a fight. I'm doing the right thing because I'm avoiding conflict in the relationship. Well, when there's a grievance, not an annoyance, and there's a big difference between something that bugs you and something where you've been done wrong.
Right.
I mean, one is on you to look past, and the other is for the person who's done you wrong to make right.
And even in the place where someone's done you wrong, you still have choices.
You have an opportunity to forgive or not to forgive.
You have an opportunity to look past it, offer grace and forgiveness, or you have an opportunity to be offended and make the situation worse.
And speaking for the conflict avoiders in the room, a lot of times you choose to say nothing. And what happens is you just stack up offenses until, they're this high. And then you go and say, look at what you've done! And drop them in the lap of the person you're married to.
And you recant your list.
Yeah. It's so funny because I was working with a client last night, and their homework was to go over 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7, which describes what love is, and grade himself on what love is and what love isn't, and how he lives it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this periodically with myself, and when I get to love keeps no record of wrongs done to it, I usually give myself a pretty poor grade on that one because I struggle in that area. But the thing is, if I were to speak up in a loving, respectful way and let Melisa know, hey, you never tell me how good looking I am. I wish you would do that more often. It's good for my confidence, you know, instead of thinking, oh, she doesn't think I'm attractive, and then spinning that around in my head 14,000 times. If I had let the thought out in a loving, respectful way, I would be better served. And I think that a lot of times people choose to say nothing, thinking they're making a good decision, or at least, when we get real, making the easy decision,
Right.
making the less complicated decision, making the decision that's not going to force me and my spouse to deal with whatever issue is recurrent. I mean, here's the thing. If somebody does something to you one time and you don't say anything about it, you know, that's probably better served. But if they keep committing the same grievance against you and you say nothing, what do you expect?
Well,
They may not even know they're doing something wrong.
exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
You know, how is Melisa supposed to know? You know, other than just by looking at me every day, how good looking I am. I mean, that's an important thing that a guy needs to hear.
It is. And you know what? I don't tell you that enough. And that's a place where I've been silent, and I need to start working on speaking up more.
I don't want to go around thinking I'm Barney Fife when I should be thinking that I'm, Andy Taylor. and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, please tell me, just because I think that's funny. I'm guessing some people out there will know exactly who I'm talking about, but other people will have no idea.
So we have a question from our Facebook Live crowd, and that is, can you talk about the non-confronter spouse, the non-confrontational spouse versus the confrontational spouse again? So we're going to answer questions because they want to know.
Okay. I'm poking her because I know she's going to get mad at me and confront me because she's a confronter.
So let me help people out. Would you mind not doing that? Thank you.
That was not very confrontational. I was trying to give a
visual example.
A visual example.
Well,
I know what I can do. I know what I can do to confront you.
It would ruin our morning show.
Okay.
So let's not. So here's the thing.
My hands are on camera so that everybody knows that I'm
okay.
myself.
When you, for all you confronters who are married to non-confrontational people, the conflict avoiders, man, almost in every group, in every couple, there's a confronter and a conflict avoider. Occasionally, you will find that they're two of the same people, but opposites attract. So we have a tendency to marry somebody who's not like us.
And here's what we find is, most people have a confrontation avoider and a confronter, because the theory that opposites attract that you just mentioned is true. Every now and then you have a non-confronter and a non-confronter because, well, gosh, we get along so well and we never fight.
Right, which is not any better than having a confrontationalist and a conflict avoider.
What'll happen is you won't fight until both of you are fed up. Then you'll have a huge, humongous fight that lasts for 3 days and is miserable for everybody. But when you have two confronters, they know it right away and they figure out, I just can't live with this person. They're so difficult. They never agree with me, and I'm so smart. They should agree with me more often. And so you rarely find two confronters in a marriage. Every now and then, the passion of another confronter will be so appealing that it'll draw two confronters together. But Unless they've got some really good training on how to deal with their conflict, they're not going to survive very long.
So let me help out the people who are conflict avoiders and the people who are married to confronters and the confronters who are married to conflict avoiders. So we give this example all the time, and it's this. Conflict avoiders are like turtles. And when you come at a turtle with a lot of pressure, what's going to happen is the turtle is going to go back in its shell where it feels safe. So it's not going to come out until it feels safe again. And here's the thing, but this happens so often if we're not careful. If you poke a turtle long enough with a stick, it will eventually come out and it will bite you. And so what happens is we have these confronters who come at their conflict avoider with a ton of energy and a ton of passion and a ton of whatever, and the conflict avoider just goes swoop right back in their shell. And then the confronter gets really, really upset because the conflict avoider won't come out and have a conversation. So they poke it. And then pretty soon when the conflict avoider does come out, they go, rah! And because their whole goal is to push the pressure back, right? And so they want the pressure off, so they'll come back out and they'll bite. And when they do, it's this like just go to town fight. And then the confronter's like, well, why did you have to blow up so big at me? Like this was just going to be a regular conversation. But because you're at odds with each other in the way that you come together for confrontation, the way you come together for conversation, all of those things, you have to both change the way you do things. Well, first of all, confronters have to dial back the energy level. I always say if you're a confronter and you're with a conflict avoider, the confronter has to think like a feather, has to come in with a light touch, with low energy, and kind of float its way in, so that the conflict avoider isn't automatically sent scurrying back into their shell. But if you're a conflict avoider, you have to stay in the fight and stay out of your shell in order to get resolution.
Right, and the thing about it is if the pressure put on you to come to a conclusion, to find resolution today, tonight,
right this minute,
we can't stop this conversation until we get it resolved. If that pressure is what is causing you to want to withdraw into your shell, guess what? If you're willing to stick your neck out of your shell long enough, maybe you get to that resolution and the pressure stops. What is very tricky is knowing what are the conversations to pursue and what are the conversations not to pursue.
That's really a good point.
And that's what we'll talk about on the other side of this break.
All right, we'll be
Sound
right back.
good? So everybody stick around.
Well, take this time while we're taking our little commercial break to share our Facebook Live with your friends. Invite them to come and join us. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be right back in a flash here on Building Bridges with Steve and Melisa on Crossover Radio. Radio with a purpose.
Hey, this is Coach Coleman, and I'm the play-by-play voice for your Bethany Broncos. I know there's a lot of guys out there who are trying to kick that nasty tobacco dipping habit, and I know most guys need a little energy boost to try to get them through a long day. And I'm here to give you a solution for both. Grinds Coffee Pouches. Grinds are coffee-filled pouches infused with your favorite flavors, such as wintergreen, mint, vanilla, and many more. All of the ingredients in Grinds are 100% safe for consumption and will add a pep to your step. So head on over to getgrinds.com and use our promo code CMI15 to get 15% off your order today. Again, that's getgrinds.com and use the promo code CMI15 to get 15% off of your order. It's time to rise and grinds with Grinds today.
Did you know that about 80% of all bankruptcies are due to medical issues? If you're a business owner, what happens to your business if you can't work for an extended period of time? What about retirement? Do you have enough to live on for the rest of your life? Do you have a succession plan in place for your business? As a small business owner, it's vital that you make sure your business is protected for the future. If you don't have a plan, Five Rings Financial can help get you on the road to financial security and protection. Just give us a call today at 405-413-3638, or you can email me directly at Jamie, that's JAMIE, at 5ringsokc.com to schedule a consultation about securing your financial future.
So,
Hey, I just want to, before we start off, jump back into the conversation. I want to say,
I'm so good looking.
you guys are married to the cute guy. He's really handsome, really good looking. He's terrific.
Thanks.
I
That's
love
awfully
him
kind of you.
so much. He makes my life better every day. It's like we're busy living the dream.
Living the dream.
Hey, when you're married to your best friend,
It makes life a little bit easier.
it makes life great. I just want to say thanks. We did a little conference this past weekend up at Hope City Church in Arcadia, Oklahoma. Great little church. Man, they are on fire there. They are really
pressing into God.
They are just really doing things big there in their church. So if you're looking for a good church to visit, go try Hope City Church in Arcadia, Oklahoma. And we just want to say thank you to Pastor Terry and Pastor Nina for bringing us in and letting us speak to use their facility to do our conference. And thanks to all the couples who came. It was a really powerful weekend. We're getting some great testimonies back. I got a testimony from if you've worked with us at all. Here's something we think that there's so much power in praying, in blessing, praying a prayer of blessing over your spouse every day out loud so they can hear you. So we're going to teach that almost every time we open our mouths at some venue for conferences or whatever. And so I got a Facebook message from one of the couples who attended and said, for the first time ever, my husband prayed the blessing over me. And she cried all day. She said, I was just so overwhelmed that I cried all day. And not sadness, but joy. Every time she thought about her heart just overwhelmed and it flooded out her eyes. And so
I didn't know this. You should have shared that with me.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to shout out to the couples who came and invested in their marriage. We tell couples all the time, especially when we do pre-marriage counseling with couples, we tell them, you always need counseling before you think you do. Mm-hmm. Most people wait for marriage counseling until they're in a radical crisis. And so we want to encourage you, if you are a couple out there, if you know a couple out there that's, maybe you're not at, divorce door, but you're just struggling to get along and you're struggling in your conflict resolution or you're struggling to communicate or connect through communication. Get some help, get some counseling. Bridge Builder Marriage Ministry does counseling every day. Day in and day out, not every day, but every week we're busy seeing clients and doing counseling and helping people. And marriage, God's designed marriage. It was His idea. And He's given us a book that tells us exactly how to do it well and to be successful at being married. So we want to help you with that. If you guys if you need help with your marriage, man, there's no shame. Actually, wise people get counsel. The Bible says in the multitude of counselors is wisdom. And so wise people get counsel. Never be embarrassed to ask for help. And maybe you're a husband and you're like, well, my wife would never come to counseling. You know what? We've seen husbands turn their entire household and marriage around because they chose to do some right things. And Steve is happy to work with those husbands and help them make their marriage better. It's the same with wives. Maybe you'll come, but your husband won't. You know what? As a wife, you have incredible power to make your marriage what God created it to be. And so I work sometimes with just wives by themselves. And then Stephen and I work with couples together. So if you're in need of help in your marriage, maybe it's just a little thing and you just need to come a couple of times and have a safe place to talk through a difficult conversation. Or maybe it's terrible and you need to rebuild your trust because it's been completely violated. Either way, we want to recommend ourselves, Bridge Builder Marriage Ministry for your marriage counseling needs. So
like the sign says
I'll
behind us.
I'll put a little link to our website in the Facebook notes. And you know what? You can give us a call or at least share us with people that you know.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about when to talk and when not to talk. Okay. I'm sure there are couples out there who have small children. And few things will sap the patience from a relationship like a small child.
Right.
Who's very needy, who takes up a lot of your time, and sometimes that time is in the wee hours of the morning. okay, if you've got a small kid and it's 9:30 and you've been at work all day and your spouse has been with the child all day and you're both a little frazzled, you know, maybe that's not the time to have an in-depth conversation
About something that's really important.
about something that's really important. Maybe instead what you do is you say a quick prayer over that person and you call it a night and you turn in early. At the end of a long day is a time to choose silence. If somebody has come to you with something, let's say Melisa comes to me and she's really mad and she tells me about this person, at work, how horrible they are and how her boss didn't treat her fair and how everyone drove like an idiot in traffic and she needs to vent. Maybe that's a time where you are silent and you listen, and then when she's done, you don't give her a lecture about how she needs to turn the other cheek and, she needs to forgive to be forgiven and she needs to just cut that person some slack and she needs to be Jesus with skin on and, because she's all wound up and your well-meaning lecture on how she needs to live her life better is not going to provoke life change in her. It's going to provoke a response from her about what do you know and you do this too and blah, 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 blah.
Because here is a valuable rule to know in conversation. It happens in regular conversation. It happens in conflict.
Always agree with Steve.
First of all, the first thing that you could do to be successful is always agree with Steve. And I think that that's a recipe for success 100%. But for those of you who
we're recording this so I can play it back in the future when you are
when I'm not busy agreeing
defending
with you.
Not agreeing with Steve, but that's okay.
But Steve doesn't ever keep an account of wrongs done to him, so we're really okay.
True.
I've got that on recorded that you're working on that.
It's
a work in progress.
But
here's the thing: when you get into conversations, please recognize women and men do not conversate the same way. They do not even they really try hard to. Even like Stephen and I try so hard to have conversations with the other person's mindset in mind. But here's the thing. Men are always going to talk about what they think and women are always going to talk about what they feel. And those two things don't mesh very well. And especially if you're in conflict, one of the things that happens is I listen to Steve and then I respond and he's telling me exactly what he thinks about something and I respond with how I feel about it. And the truth is I can't tell you how many times, bless his heart, maybe we'll be in conflict and we'll be, trying to connect through that conflict. And I'll say to him, do you at least understand why I feel this way? And almost every single time he'll say, I don't, but I'm trying so hard to figure it out. And the truth is he's working really hard to comprehend a feelings-oriented language. And I'm trying really hard to comprehend a thought-oriented language or a cognitive-oriented language. And so not recognizing that we're not like each other and that's how God created and it's not what's wrong with each other. It just means that when we have conversations, and so if a wife comes and she says like, oh my gosh, and she wants to dump all of this emotion in her husband's lap, it's really hard sometimes for him to like pick up all the pieces and be fully engaged because his really heartfelt best solution is how to solve a problem, right? And because that's the way guys are created. Is they're created to be problem solvers. They're created to be not fixers. That's kind of sometimes has a negative connotation, but they're repairers. And so a lot of times women don't want, and women aren't driven by that whole solve the problem, fix the need, fill the need, repair the breach, whatever. They're just like, we have this bundle of emotion we need to release, and it's the perfect conflict for husbands and wives just because they're created so differently.
Okay. Pay attention. Take notes on that out there. It's important information.
All right. Thank you for saying that.
And so there are times when you may be best off just listening. And then there are times, for instance, Melisa is troubled by something, and this is really bothering me. It may not even have to do anything to do with you. And she pours out her heart about something that's a burden to her. At some point, she's going to want a response that recognizes, I heard what you said, I'm here to support you. At that point, nodding and not saying anything back after she's had this moment of vulnerability where she's shared something deep and important to her, being quiet at that point is communicating, I didn't listen to this important thing that you wanted to talk about.
Right.
And that's a place where silence is going to hurt you, and you need to say something, and to build on what Melissa says. Wow, that must have really been painful for you. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You reach out, you respond in a way that connects with the emotion of what was just shared. You respond in kind. She does a big share, and I say, great, that's can we have spaghetti for dinner? That's maybe a response that doesn't need to be made. You need to respond in kind when there's a vulnerability or an important share. And that's important to go to what DLC mentioned. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And you want to respond in kind to the type of conversation. If she's talking about the weather and you talk about, your deep-seated fear of spiders, it does that, and there's no connection. Your relationship is not furthered by a response that doesn't have any connection to what was just told. That says, I'm not listening, and I'm only concerned with what I'm thinking about, and you're probably going to wind up in conflict before you know it if you keep responding like that.
And I think it's important that you recognize after you've listened carefully and after you've actively listened. For me, part of actively listening is making sure that I don't communicate inadvertently something I'm not meaning by the look on my face or my body posture or whatever. Because you know what, 70% of communication is nonverbal. So there's a lot of loudness in the silence of your body. As your body, you may be saying one thing, but your body may be saying something completely different. So make sure there's some congruency there. But the other thing that we can do as we've listened to the other person, we can respond. Steve talked about responding in kind, but responding in kind sometimes means using their language. Girls, if we are responding to our husband, he doesn't receive it best when we respond in feeling verbiage. And husband, just the same way, wives don't respond as well when husbands respond in a cognitive thought language. So when you're talking to your spouse and you're responding to something they said, make sure that you respond in kind. So if I'm responding to Steve, I'm going to ask him, I'm going to say words like, well, what do you think about that? What do you think is the best thing to do? Do you have a solution for this? What is your, how do you think we should fix this? And all of those things then speak in his language, where if he responds to me, some of the things that he can say to me are things like, well, how did that make you feel? That must have really hurt your feelings. I can see that made you sad, or I can see that made you happy. And in those places, when we respond after we've been silent long enough for them to complete their thought, or their whatever they want to say to you, and then we respond in the way that connects the most with them. And I think that that's a powerful technique that we can learn as we operate with our spouse, and it helps us connect, it helps us connect through conversation way better.
Okay, we're going to connect to our sponsors right
Thank you,
now.
sponsors.
And we will be back in about a minute or so. So please stick around. We will continue our discussion about the sounds of silence, when and where silence is helpful to a marriage and when it's not. We will be back in a flash here on Building Bridges with Steve and Melisa.
Has your business or organization spent a fortune on printers only to have them break down constantly and need maintenance or other care? Try Cartridge World's Why Buy a Printer program. It's completely customizable to your business's needs, and they bring the printer to you with no upfront costs or maintenance fees. Just purchase your toner and ink through Cartridge World and let them take care of the rest. So stop by or call Cartridge World today and stop fighting with your printer. You can call 405-359-8765 or stop by at 1704 South Broadway in Edmond.
Hey, this is John Chris.
Hey, this is John Muskillet.
What's going on, y'all? It's Dylan Chase and DJ Squared.
Hey, it's Carrie Job, and you're listening to Crossover Radio.
What's going on? It's your boy KB. You are listening to Radio with a Purpose.
Okay, we're back. I told you it was about a minute.
That was not.
It was like 59 seconds.
50. Talking about the sounds of silence and when silence works and when silence doesn't work. Silence doesn't work. What happens is, I'm trying to figure out how to word this correctly. Jump right in, babe.
I can tell you when it doesn't work. Silence never works when it's used as a weapon.
Woohoo!
Okay.
You're so smart.
And here's the thing is, they call it the silent treatment. I am withholding communication from you because you did something wrong. Because I'm mad at you. Because of a perceived injustice. And you know what? You're never going to build the relationship when you use silence as a weapon. In the same way, you should never speak intentionally to injure. You shouldn't withhold speech to punish. And the fact of the matter is this, is when you are inclined to use the silent treatment is exactly when you need to have a conversation.
For sure. That's super powerful, Steve.
Because you are to the point where there has been some offense that has said, well, they're going to pay. I'm going to make them suffer. They're going to be begging me
to engage.
And they'll give me anything I want. None of those motives are healthy. None of those motives are good. And there are absolutely times, I will use an example. I know a couple, and the wife is maybe not the best cook in the kitchen. Not my wife. My wife is an amazing cook. This
is a hypothetical story.
Yes.
Yeah.
If she makes something and it is not particularly tasty, you probably don't need to tell her how nasty it is. That's where silence is preferred. Silence is the better option, because all you're going to do is aggravate her
and hurt her feelings.
You can thank her for how hard she worked making
right.
the meal. You don't have to lie about it being tasty.
Right.
But you can find something nice to say about the effort that she put in. Wow, that was a really creative menu choice.
Don't make it sound like a backhanded compliment.
That was
Be authentic.
That was out of the box thinking. I wish you'd made something out of a box.
Don't do that.
That
that's
was
really funny, y'all. It is not something that you should use.
Gee, honey, the venison tartare was special. Do you have any Kraft mac and cheese in there you can throw together? Maybe not the best option there. But seriously, if you're getting to the point where you are choosing silence for a prolonged period of time, that's when you need to talk. And if you don't feel the conversation is safe, that's when you need to get somebody like us involved. Guess what? If we're not your cup of tea, we can recommend a bunch of people who might be.
We know some really good marriage ministries that we're happy to celebrate, to send people to. So.
Right, but you cannot, you will never move your relationship forward if your fallback position is always prolonged silence.
Yeah. I want to share something that happened with Stephen and I early in our relationship. One of the things that I had purposed to do was not to respond in a way that was hurtful, because I had come out of a long time in my life where there was a lot of, almost every conversation was respond with the next dagger. And so I didn't want to continue that kind of behavior because I recognized it's not healthy, and I didn't want to wound Stephen. And so sometimes if he would share something with me that either was something that hurt him or something that he, maybe I needed to do something differently or make him feel more loved in this way or whatever, my response, instead of just shooting back a dagger at him, which would have been my normal pattern in my former life, I would be quiet and try to not, in an effort not to say anything that was hurtful, right? And so sometimes I would be quiet, sometimes I would leave the room, and instead of and I didn't really explain, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying really hard to guard my mouth so nothing bad comes out of it, and right now the best option is for me just to shut my mouth. And if I stay in the room with you, I may be more tempted to, not be kind. And so we got into kind of this pattern, and part of it was sometimes I was just hurt and I needed to go like in the corner and suck my thumb for a minute, because truth is, most people don't enjoy constructive criticism, because at the end of the day they just feel criticized, and that I'm not saying that's what it was, but sometimes I perceived it that way, and so Steve became really tentative about sharing things with me that he knew maybe could bring on some conflict or whatever, because he'd say, I don't want you to shut me out again. I don't want you to shut me out. And so what happened was, two people with sort of the right heart and a good intention ended up finding themselves in places where conflict didn't get resolved in a way it could, was because he perceived that I would shut him out, and my perception was I was trying not to say mean things and hurtful things. And so sometimes that becomes a real thing in your relationship. And if that's you, then it's important for you to have some communication about that.
And here's the thing. There can be a situation where the solution is not silence and not having a conversation, but both.
Right.
And you
might want to explain that.
Well, oddly enough, that was my plan, was to continue talking and fill in the blanks for the listening audience out there.
Look how smart I am. We're going in the same direction.
The example that Melisa used, with us, she could have said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about what's going on, but now's not the best time because I'm still a little emotional about it. Let's talk about this, after dinner.
Right.
So what you've got is you've got a choice for silence in the immediate future to protect her saying something unkind, which is the correct decision. But also choosing not silence, but choosing conversation later about it, so that I don't wonder, I'm not like twisting in the wind wondering what's going on with her. So there's some situations that the best answer is both. Sometimes you just need to shut up. Sometimes, you are just being a baby and need to suck your thumb and move on with your life. But other times you need to have a conversation, and we always tell couples, you don't spank your kid when you're mad at them. You don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry, and you don't have conversation when you're ruled by your emotions.
Right.
Because when you're ruled by your emotions, you're going to say a bunch of stuff that you don't mean. You're going to crank everything up to a 12 when it only needs to be at a 5. And we go back to what we said at the beginning of the program, where you're, in super slow-mo reaching for the words that just came out of your mouth because you're speaking out of emotion.
And I think it's really important. I think there's a place for, where when you're ramped up with emotion is not the best time to have a real level-headed conversation. And so a lot of times couples get into this place where they know that they are on the on-ramp of explosive conflict. And sometimes learning to watch yourself, be aware of what's going on, and saying, you know what, I think we both should take a break just from this conversation for a little bit. Give ourselves time to really think about what we need out of the conversation, what we want, and then I'm going to take a break and collect myself, and we're going to come back together and have this conversation later. And we can really prevent a lot of unnecessary, explosive, hurtful conversations if we can learn to say, you know what, I need to take a break and get silent and hear the Lord. For what the Bible says, be still and know that I am God. Like in some moments, I just need to be still and listen to the Lord. And I think when we begin to operate in that, where we can say, listen, I know we need to handle this conversation, but I don't think we're handling it in the best way right now. And I think we're on the path to like really blowing it out of the water. So can we just take a break? Now here's the truth about that. In that moment, you do need to be in conversation and finish the conversation when you're not angry. And
all you turtles out there, if your goal is to alleviate the pressure, the worst thing you can do is not come back to the table.
Right.
Because if your partner, your spouse, agrees to table a conversation until later, and you're thinking you're just going to slide out the side door and not have that conversation because it's going to be tough or difficult or uncomfortable, what will happen is the next time you will not get that compromise.
Right.
She will stay on you like he will stay on you like white on rice until the resolution that they're looking for is had. And you will not have an easing of pressure. You will have a multiplying of pressure. But if you say, let's talk about this after we've had a time to organize our thoughts, maybe gotten some dinner, get that hangry edge off, and you come back to it, they're going to trust you that you're not ducking the problem, and you're more likely to get that same compromise down the road.
Really
these are actual real marriage tips that, if you apply them, are going to benefit your relationship.
Actually, and the truth is, these are just good universal relationship tips all the way across the board today. Today, while we always focus on marriage, the truth is every one of these tips that we've talked about today are really good universally in every relationship. Parent-child relationship, friend-to-friend relationship, employee-coworker relationship. All of these things, all of these tips are really just good relational tips. And so we hope that there's something that you've heard today that helps you in your life, and that you begin to apply some of the techniques that we've talked about today, and test them out in relationships and see the progress that you make with those. And we just, again, we want to offer the idea that if you struggle in communication with your spouse, get some help. And don't just keep going for 20 years.
Right. There's no sense riding a bike that's broken.
Right.
Doesn't go very fast, and it's really hard to get up hills.
And here's the thing. If you think about counseling, a lot of people think about counseling and they're like, oh yeah, we don't want to spend the next 2 years of our life in counseling. The truth is, most of the couples that work with us for like 2 or 3 months, and then they go on about their way. And so, I want to encourage you. You always need help before you think you need help. And I stayed in a bad marriage, and it was worse than it needed to be because neither one of us thought that it was important to get help. So don't find yourself in that category. We want to thank you today for hanging out with us here on Building Bridges with Steve and Melisa. This hour has zoomed by, and our show is coming to an end. But remember that we're here every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time here on Crossover Radio. If you haven't downloaded the Crossover Radio app, go to your App Store or Google Play Store and download the Crossover Radio app and take it with you everywhere you go, because there's lots of great programming.
And feel free to share this on social media. Feel free to tell your friends, hey, there's this cool show, 8 to 9 on Crossover Radio. You can tune it in pretty much anywhere. And we will see you back here at the Palatial Bridge Builder Studio in beautiful downtown Yukon next week, 8 a.m. Central. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye, everybody.